This is Charlotte O'Sullivan, Mulberry's Global Marketing and Digital Director. And Charlotte has over 15 years' experience in luxury marketing. And before joining Mulberry, she worked for Myla, the luxury lingerie brand.
I think my old boss is in the audience. Hello.
And she's also part of the management team that's been driving Mulberry's sustainability conversation. So I suppose I wanted to start with what I think is quite interesting about Mulberry, which is that what you might once have perceived as a bit of a strategic disadvantage in that it was founded in 1970. It's not a huge brand, and it's very based in the UK. You might perceive that as a disadvantage, but when it comes to sustainability, I feel it's been built into the brand's DNA from the start, because right from the beginning, Roger Saul was making bags at his kitchen table using sort of scraps. So do you think that has actually, really helped Mulberry turn itself into a really sustainable luxury brand?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in the space, we were born in 1971. So in terms of the luxury, sector, we see ourselves as a teenager. And as you said, when Roger started the business, it was something that it was the offcuts from the local leather factory. It was named Mulberry after the tree that he would pass on the way to, on his bike on the way to work. It was really a family business, and it had this ethos of made to last at its absolute core. I've been in the business for 12 years, and day one, you get the health and safety tour, but day two, you get taken to the factories. And it's extremely clear from that second that is the absolute core beating heart of the business. And it's interesting, we're about to turn 50 next year. So 50 always is a moment for reflection for any business.
Or midlife crisis.
Totally, that too. And it was interesting is when we sat down as a management team and we sort of were speaking openly and saying, okay, what do we think that our legacy might look like for the next 50 years, it was sort of almost disappointingly short meeting. It was extremely clear immediately, total, absolute, everyone said yes. It was about leading in terms of being a responsible luxury brand. And I think what's interesting to me is that as we all are talking about this more and more, is that what we thought was just the way that you did things, we never really questioned why we did things that way. It's become increasingly clear with more transparency and more information that we could see that what we were doing that was perhaps not the norm. So when it gave us the opportunity, as you're saying, is that we sort of said, hang on a second, we're already doing these things, let's go further. I think for me, what is really amazing to be a part of is that we can move very quickly to actually decide to let's do that completely throughout the supply chain or throughout our manufacturing processes. And that also the passion through the business is that every single person, from the newest apprentice to the design team, from the creative director, the CEO, they say yes. I mean, like it's almost disappointing that you get absolutely no friction. You think, oh, come on, I'm not being challenging enough. Go further. So I think that for us, that's a sort of really interesting that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we may not have understood. To your point, quite how much that was an advantage.
Yes. I mean, can you talk me through some of the recent initiatives that you've come up with? I mean, I think the Mulberry Green Charter is very interesting.
Yeah. So we call it Mulberry Green because it's our colour. It's about the landscape. But 70% of our business is around leather goods. So it's always made sense for us to focus there. And what we think about this really is in terms of how we source, how we make, and how we repair. So this is where I become, I'm sorry in advance, I become a leather bore. No one in my team, family, friends was next to me at a dinner party anymore because oh my God, here she goes again, talking about leather. So I think the first thing was about this idea of, well, hang on, can leather really be sustainable? How does that work? Because actually we all know that the meat industry is one of the biggest polluters in the world. So in the first instance, everything that we make, all the materials that we use, it's a byproduct of food production. And actually what's kind of extraordinary today is it's estimated that something like 16% of leather actually goes to landfill. So if you sort of think about, and that is often to do with leather that's sourced from parts of the world where the traceability is really complicated and the quality of the leather is not so good. Yeah. And also it's often associated with different industries that use quite high levels of chemical processes. And actually as those industries economies decline, then therefore the leather declines. We source almost all of our leather from Europe. So in terms of being able to say, I know where that came from, I understand how that farm works. And amazingly, some of these farms actually act as carbon sinks now. This is the bit where I get really dull. But so traceability is really key. Then also the tanneries that we work with. Some of these suppliers are really extraordinary. So there's something called the Leather Working Group, which is an internationally understood level of accreditation in terms of particularly how they look at how tanneries work. So there is a sort of a level of environmental accreditation that tanneries can achieve in terms of how you use water, what are your chemical outputs, and we've been a member there since 2012, and we're also one of the founding members of the Animal Welfare Group. So what that means now is that we, for Spring/Summer 20, it means that 65% of all of the leathers that we use are environmentally accredited. And actually the remaining 35% isn't because they're bad, it's actually because it's such a new accreditation that those tanneries haven't achieved it yet. So our approach there is to say, don't just say goodbye to that partner, actually work with them. It can take sometimes up to a year to achieve the accreditation. Work with them to help them achieve it, because that's actually got a greater benefit to the whole industry. So that's really in terms of the sourcing piece, and in terms of how we make. So we manufacture 50% of our leather goods in the UK. We have 2 factories. We employ 500 craftspeople. Last year, we're very delighted. All of our UK operations actually became carbon neutral. And in a few months, just paperwork pending, we will achieve zero waste to landfill certification. So these are sort of initiatives. Again, it's sort of it was. I don't want to say it was easy, but actually, in terms of saying to people, we think that this is the right way to do things, was great. And I guess the third piece for us is really around repair, because this is the element I think was perhaps the greatest surprise to us, because we, again, day 2 in the business, you get taken around the repairs part of the business. And actually, we keep leather and component stores going back over 30 years because we're obsessed with this idea that we will repair anything that we can. And what's interesting is that is not necessarily the norm in our industry at the moment. So I think what for us, the people who work in those repair artisan studios are actually sometimes the most skilled people, because they have to have the broadest breadth of knowledge. They have to be able to authenticate product. They have to be able to have all of the skills that are required in terms of the archive of product. And I think for us, coupling all of those things together, which, like I said, we have always just naturally done, it was very interesting to see that is actually not yet the norm.
Yes, I mean, sort of being devil's advocate for a minute, people would say, surely the most eco-friendly thing is not to make the bag in the first place.
Yeah, what about luxury and growth, or any industry and growth? I think that's a really important point, which is you could challenge and say, look, if you did every single green, responsible thing in the world, if you have growth, you're still making a problem. I think that's a fair criticism, but I would also say, we make to last. When someone buys a Mulberry bag, I do not think that they are imagining that it's going to end up in landfill. And we're also about sustainable growth. So when you look at the growth pattern, yes, we have grown internationally, but it's at a very steady, sustained pace. And I think the idea that actually you're engaging with customers for a long time, and that you're saying, if you come back every 5 or every 10 years, that's okay. You're still part of the Mulberry community. I think that for us is about how we do this in the right way, because there's no point being a business that's out of business. If you're really responsible and you're not around, you're not really helping anyone. And I think what's increasingly clear to us is that it's really going to be about individuals and organisations leading here. That is what is required. So I think in this space, we're not quite at the point of having a kind of regenerative economic model to share. But I think that there's a great opportunity for luxury brands in general to be able to really lead in this area.
Yes, I think so, because if you're buying one beautiful piece and keeping it for 20 years, I mean, I have to say, I have to sort of express a personal interest here, because I got my first job and I bought myself a Mulberry handbag to celebrate.
Thank you.
Which was quite, I won't say how long ago, but it was quite a while ago.
Well, this is really common, isn't it? This is what we find, is that exactly these are landmark moments in someone's life. And yeah, I had the same thing, by the way. It was the first, my brother actually bought his wife, and it was the first time he bought her a bag. It was the first time she said, I love you, apparently. They're still together, it's okay. It was a genuine romance. But absolutely, this idea that buy well
Yeah.
and repair well. I think in our space, those are some of the most, and make it well.
Yes. So you've brought everyone in the company along with you. Are there sort of initiatives within the company? I mean, how much does this sort of translate to sort of behaviour within the factories, or?
I mean, it's everywhere. So what's an example? Okay, the loos in our Somerset factories, they all use rainwater. You cannot, there are no waste paper baskets. It's actually really annoying. You can't throw anything away. When you walk around, you're sort of thinking, oh God, where do I put this? There's nowhere to put it. You have to either recycle it or don't waste it in the first place. The design team, so we are just about to launch a new collection called the M collection, which is, it's interesting. It uses a regenerated nylon called Econyl, which some of you might know about. It's really about using salvaged ocean and landfill waste, and the team have basically created it, merged it with a BCI, a Better Cotton Initiative cotton, to create a new jacquard that's sort of very lightweight, waterproof, but it's also it's terrific in terms of a responsible material. For autumn-winter 20, we will have replaced all virgin nylon within our collection with regenerated nylon, and even down to our packaging. These are initiatives that really they came from the team. Yeah. So we used to, I'm sure a lot of everyone works with FSC paper, but actually the team have started to work with a company that's based out the Lake District that uses cup cycling, which is really about separating out the plastic from the coffee cups. And from this year, that will be the paper that is used for all of our packaging, our consumer-faced packaging. And we're saying that really by autumn-winter 21, we want to have eliminated totally all virgin plastic from our supply chain. I mean, that's a great example. Yeah. We have no idea how we're going to do it, right? We haven't even measured it. But I think this is a great example of saying, come on, we must be able to do this because the suppliers are going to keep pace with us. They're going to help us. But also, we've already, by autumn-winter 20, we will have made all of our customer-facing packaging curbside recyclable. So these are things that if you simply had a CEO saying, you must do this, could take quite a long time.
Yes.
But when you hear and you see the enthusiasm from your teams and their passion, and there's a real culture of it, it's really about ideas and supports, and about saying, okay, how can I help you make this happen?
I mean, these things must add a degree of cost, I imagine. Do you pass that on, or?
No, I mean, it's a good point. So no is the straightforward answer. So when you look at the cost of what's a good example, so if you look at the cost of our nylon products, or if you look at the cost of, for instance, we launched the Portobello tote just before Christmas, which is our first 100% sustainable leather bag. Yeah. That was an absolute point of focus, which is this has to be completely in line with our pricing, because actually the customer should not have to make those kind of decisions. They should be able to buy knowing that it's responsibly sourced and that they're getting great value. They shouldn't have to pay a premium for responsibility. We should sort that out. So there might be moments, let's say, during an initial season when we're testing something to say, okay, we will take a couple of percentage points on the margin, but we've got to look at it. So what's an example? The next focus for us is saying, okay, how do we look at componentry? Because traditionally metal has been very hard to actually source sustainably. So now we're looking at how can we use recycled metals. What's tricky there, though, is that there isn't yet an international body that can sort of certify that is the best way to do it. So in lieu of that, we say, okay, this is our best idea right now, let's try it. But actually what's interesting in the example of the Portobello was it sold out online within 48 hours, and there's been a waiting list of hundreds and hundreds of people since. So what's been so affirming for us is that the customer wants it. So it might feel like a punt the first time you try, but actually everything is pointing that this is what people want, and I think increasingly expect.
So are you saying it's a sort of big brand selling point, the fact that they know that it's going to be as sustainable as possible? I
think that people are often surprised that luxury brands aren't doing this anyway. I think that is and this is the point around transparency of information. And I think, our big hope is in a way is that in 5 years' time, we won't have to keep talking about this because it will be the norm. Yeah. We will have moved on to the next thing. So for us, it's about saying, okay, how can we be as transparent as possible? I think there's also a huge opportunity for collaboration, because actually when one brand starts to do something interesting, something innovative, the suppliers have new skills. There's a transparency of information there that I hope will mean that actually for the broader population, that the ease with which they can make responsible decisions, it should be much more straightforward.
Has there been anything sort of really challenging for you?
Challenging in terms of responsible initiatives?
Yes, I don't know if there's anything you've tried that you just haven't been able to do, or whether there's something that...
I think the componentry is really tough because it's if you're looking at jewellery, for instance, if you have any leftover, you just melt it down and remake it. So we're trying to really apply that same thinking. So we're looking at, for instance, we're looking at plastic componentry, but then you've got to balance it with the made to last element. So this is the thing: is it good quality? Will it last a long time? Does it look good? Does it function? And does our customer like it? But I think that's one of those great ones which we're going to keep going.
So do you think then that the luxury consumer, is it the new generation of luxury consumers, or is it everybody now just wants to buy with a clear conscience and you don't want to have to sort of worry about?
I think we certainly see more interest and more challenge from a younger demographic of customer. I think that there is a general raising of consciousness across the board. Yeah. But I think certainly amongst younger customers, it definitely feels like there is more challenge, yes. But also more support and actual kind of really saying well done when you actually get there.
I mean, I guess that is because, as you say, you're a teenage brand, and I guess your core customer may be a bit younger than somebody buying from retail.
Yeah, I think we absolutely have a breadth, and this idea that you make something. I hope you're still using your bag, by the way.
I am.
Yeah, good. This idea that we make something that lasts, I think that's also really important. That there's a timelessness to the design. Yeah. The idea that it's something that you keep for yourself, that you can pass on. I think that's something that is relevant across the generations.
So, I know it's a very boring question, but Brexit. Has it altered anything for you? I mean, how has it affected your plans?
It hasn't altered our plans. I think probably like many other businesses, what we really are just looking for is clarity and certainty. Yeah. And I think the most, immediate point for us is around tariffs and duties and sourcing of materials and exports. Yeah. But fundamentally, the way that we operate, the way that we work hasn't been changed, and I don't think it will be drastically, but it's really about saying, okay, how can we prepare, and how can we work to ensure, the last thing we want is for any cost inflation to be passed on to our customer. Yes.
And you were saying that the quickest meeting you ever had was the one where you had to decide where the brand was going in the next 50 years.
It was the one where we laid out all of the responsible initiatives in the Mulberry Green Charter, and we sort of thought there were a few things in there that might be controversial. Yeah. It was over within an hour.
Right. Yeah. And so where will Mulberry be in 50 years' time?
Oh wow. Hopefully I'll be retired. Yeah. But I think, I would really, even in the next 5 years, my hope is that really we don't have to keep talking about this, that it is absolutely the norm, and that luxury brands across the board lead in this space. I would hope that Mulberry is continuing to innovate, because I think that we have, I think when you have that passion and culture, it's something incredibly precious to work with. But I hope it's something that all of us, as not just business people, but also people who do consume, that we are able to do that in a mindful way, but that the brands have taken care of that detail for us.
Yes. So is that where you see British luxury going, sort of more generally?
I hope so. I think that there is, a huge amount of, that amazing combination of craft and of innovation. I think that is extremely exciting, and I really, I think that would be something that we could lead in. I think all of us, and about this idea of collaboration across the industry is going to be absolutely key.
It's sort of like another industrial revolution, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a completely different way of manufacturing.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the kind of conversations we have. What if we try it this way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what's your personal idea of luxury?
Make well, make it well. Don't make me do the hard work. Be open with how you do things, and it should be affirming and it should last.
Yes. I gather you have 2 little boys who are already sort of quite eco-aware.
Last week was Sustainability Week. 4-year-olds, they already give us a hard time. Why is there a plastic bag here? And quite rightly. But I think, the idea that the weight is all on that generation. You still think there's a lot of time we know as a business we can move quickly.
Yes.
Why don't we all try?
Yes. Thank you very much. I don't know if there's any questions for Charlotte.
Please, thank you. I read yesterday that Mike Ashley's bought a stake in Mulberry. How is that going to change, do you think, the business going forward?
Do you want me to take that? But actually, forgive me, Kate, just brand new news, and we're actually not going to be covering that.
It's okay. I mean, it's fine. I mean, we're a publicly traded company, so any of you are welcome to buy and sell shares. It's obviously we don't comment on anyone who's on the share register. But so your guess is as good as mine.
I've got one question for you, sorry. We heard this morning about sustainability being a priority for some. Apologies. Is my mic back on again? We heard this morning about sustainability being a priority for some customers, but for other customers it was just something that needed to be happening and they didn't really care, they just wanted to know what's happening. How do you tackle some of the communications challenges around sustainability, and how do you talk about it in a way that's really engaging to the customer but doesn't necessarily dominate, over product beauty and efficacy and all the other aspects that are so important in the luxury codes?
It's a really good question, and it's something that we have talked about a lot internally. I remember even 5 years ago, we used to say, should we talk about the fact that we manufacture 50% in the UK? Are we going to be criticised for the fact that we don't manufacture 100%? Well, as it turns out, it's 50% more than anyone else. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what was interesting was that the second that we took that small step of saying, you know what, I think I trust our customers. They're really smart. Mm-hmm. They're really well informed. They have all sorts of information at their fingertips. Let's let them decide because they probably know anyway. At every single moment that we have gone further in terms of the information that we're sharing, in terms of explaining how we make things, how we source, and I think a great example is with the Portobello tote that we launched in December, is that the immediate gratification in terms of people willing to get into the debate, because actually for some people it's really important that we focus, that brands focus more on a vegan area, others it's more in terms of the sourcing, the traceability of the materials. The quality and level of the debate just within the community, we didn't need to sort of get involved, they moderated themselves, but there was a really high level of discourse, which I think was extremely really encouraging, because I think, of course, we're not all going to agree, and we don't always have the answers, but we're saying, look, this is what we're trying right now. We just want you to understand how we are going about it. And I think that the level of engagement is extremely positive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really terrific to see, isn't it? And that a customer that really wants to engage in that dialogue around sustainability and really help drive the agenda as well. It's incredibly rewarding to see, and particularly I also have a little person. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Helen wants a question. Please, we've got a microphone. I feel like my mic's really loud now.
You got your question.
No, you go for it. You go.
So I just wanted to ask about the collab. We talked a lot about collaboration this morning, and you had an amazing collaboration with Acne. I just wanted to ask what effect that had on the brand and how that came about, and what you wanted to achieve with it, and what the results were.
Well, we thank you first of all. We love it too. So Acne, they're old friends of ours. So we have known them for a long time, and actually the brand is really well established in Scandinavia. And we really talked about it amongst the teams as this idea of a friendship collaboration, which is this idea is incredible Scandinavian design ethos. They were completely enamored with this idea of kind of a modern British craft, and it was extremely symbiotic. It was very straightforward and fun. And actually, I think what is interesting for us is when you see your brand codes, your DNA reinterpreted through someone else's eyes. It's a really interesting exercise, and I think mutually an extremely positive experience.
Thank you. Have we got any more questions? Oh, please, thank you.
You mentioned that everyone has a huge amount of passion, so from the interns up to the directors to the craftsmen. How do you ensure that passion is there?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Where does company culture come from? it was there when I arrived 12 years ago. I think what we really talk about internally is the idea of how do we foster this. So it's something that's very precious, and actually what are we doing to encouraging it to grow. And I would say there is a real democracy about the brand. People we vote on initiatives that we think are important. Of course, there is a strategic framework in which the business operates, particularly around responsibility. But there is a real sense which is it doesn't matter how new you are to the business, what role you're doing, is that your voice will be heard and that you have a platform and opportunity. So during some of our leadership days, we have opportunities where people have 30 seconds to pitch an idea, particularly around responsibility. Don't worry, we don't make the decision in 30 seconds, but it's the idea of people having a chance to say, okay, what about this? And it'll be the person who is particularly passionate about it, perhaps has a level of expertise. And I think that if you see that your organisation is really listening to you and that you have a chance to make a difference, I think that is something that you can't help but pass on to the people within your team. And we all, I think, in some way want to know that we can have an impact. So I think that is the thing that we really focus on, and also the knowledge that the best ideas can come from the most surprising places.
If there's no more questions, we'll wrap up there. So both, thank you very, very much.